All right. Hello again, whiskey friends. Remus Repeal number 6. Let's get into this one, break it down, and see if it can live up to the amazing releases that were batch 2, 3, 4, and 5. Well, thank you for joining, everybody. Another special shout out to best whiskey friend Kelsey for helping me get another one of these. You know, Remus Repeal here, and I'll tell a story as I crack this open and pour it. But Remus Repeal, I've had a very interesting history with, because I've been into this brand for a long time. I fell in love with MGP back in 2017, 2018. And at the time that the Remuses first started coming out, they were about $80 retail. And I could get MGP single barrels for 100, 120. You know, like a Joseph Magnus single barrel or an Old Scout or something like that was still on the shelf from time to time. And then I would go down to the Remus that was proof down. The first release was like 94 proof, and they upped it to 100 proof. And it was like, well, why would I get a 100 proof thing if I could get a barrel strength release from Joseph Magnus or something for $20 more, $40 more? So I would buy these, but they would be almost a regular drinker rather than something special. And then sometime around batch 3, batch 4, you know, MGP, those old barrels started drying up. You couldn't buy those single barrels anymore. And this price stayed the same at 80. And it became actually an amazing deal when it used to be something that I took quite for granted. Now, I will say I then took it even more for granted. I didn't buy backups of 3. I didn't buy backups of 4. So even then, I took it for granted up to that point. Now, with batch 5, I did get a couple backups of that one, finally learning. But now the price is going up. Paid $120 for this one. So used to be 80, now it's $120. Now, the other thing that is happening with this Remus Repeal, so this is coming straight from MGP, aka Ross and Squibb. I guess I should say their new name, Ross and Squibb. You know, this is coming directly from them. They own the Remus brand. But Remus's appeal before was 14-year, 12-year barrels in the blend, mix of the 21%, 36% bourbon, 36% rye. This year's release is getting younger. So there's still a 2008 bourbon in there, but it's only 2%. The majority of this is coming from 2014, so 8 years ago, which is very similar to a lot of the single barrels we can get now. Now that the age is back up on the single barrels, 7-year single barrels, 8-year single barrels are becoming pretty common. So it's competing again with those single barrel releases. And that makes me wonder if the value is going to curve back to my original story, you know, back about how I felt about the brand in 2018, 2019. You know, if we can find better single barrels that are 8 years old and barrel proof, can the 100 proof version live up to that? All right. Shout out to the junkies. Cheers. Let's get into the nose. Okay. It's actually pretty inviting on the nose. Getting a lot of citrus to start. Orange, maybe even blood orange. The oak's there. You know, the older barrels in this from 2018 and 2012 are lending a good amount of oak that you don't get on the 7-year, 8-year barrels. Getting nice chocolate and some berries. I think I would call those raspberries. Not a stereotypical MGP profile for me, though. I usually get a combination of graham cracker and honey. You know, those are two things that I look for in a blind when I want to call it MGP, but maybe it's there, but it's very in the distance. Fruitier than I was expecting. Raspberry, even a little apple, the orange. Bit of cinnamon. Tell you what, on the nose, I'm perfectly fine with where this is going so far. All right, let's go in for a taste. Now, this is 100 proof, if I didn't say that before. So 100 proof release, and this would be 8 years if age dated. Okay, it's a fruity one. Definitely fruitier than I was expecting. You're not gonna, if you're gonna compare this back to the other Remuses, the oak's not there. It does drink more like an 8 year than it does anything else. There is a hint of the oak on the finish, but we'll go back to the finish in a sec. I'll give it a few more sips before I want to talk about the finish. Up front, it was giving me a lot of flavor. Not overly sweet, but some berries and some chocolate on the front of the palate. That I like. And that chocolate's pretty omnipresent throughout the experience. Got like a nice sweet cream note to go with the chocolate on that one. That sweet cream really picked up mid-palate. It's not... The balance on this one kind of feels off. It's not sweet. It's not overly sweet. It's almost drying, which is kind of the strange part of the experience. Almost like there's a powder in my mouth. Even like a baking chocolate powder. Chocolate's still there. All right, a lot of the pepper, black pepper, clove. It's definitely getting spicier the more I sip on it here. So the proof isn't holding this one back. Actually, I think the proof is fine. But there is a lack of sweetness. It's very dry, almost bitter. There's interesting things there. I don't know if I want to call it flat entirely. Get more of the raspberry on the finish. Finish is actually really decent for 100 proof. But it's mid-palate where I think I got the biggest problem with this thing. Yeah. Not a fan of it. Mid-palate. It's the dryness like a baker's chocolate powder. Well, would I recommend then the Remus Repeal Reserve? It's hard to recommend at 120. There's better MGP that you can get right now for even cheaper the cost. You know, if you talk about 7-year-old Scout for $60, I've seen a lot of good picks for $80 that are 8 years. That makes it hard again. That's where this brand can get itself in trouble. You know, just as back in 2019, I felt like it was a bad deal, but eventually became a good deal. Since they upped the price and now they're downing the age, it's kind of questionable. So on the Remus Repeal Reserve, I mean, get a sample if you can before you buy. But this is probably not one that people are going to get backups of. I'll still give Remus more chances next year. hopefully this is just an off year. I know the stocks are getting harder to come by when it comes to the age stuff that I love so much from that 2005, 2008 era. But if this is what's going to be Remus, I think the price would just have to come down, and then the recommendation level would come up. But at 120, let's not go there. Well, thanks for joining, everybody, and I'll see you later, whiskey friends.